Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Hey everyone, welcome into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber. If you are already one of our loyal subscribers, hit the notification bell to be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel. I am back with another episode of The Process, of course, and today I want to focus on the Crimson Tide's defensive line recruiting efforts, because when we look at the Tide's 2023 recruiting class, is out to a very nice start. It's still a long way to go, because National Signing Day, of course, is a long way off in terms of the early signing period. The Crimson Tide have an opportunity to just continue to add talent to this class, as they already have 18 commits at the moment. Could add a couple of more guys this week. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in the show, but I really want to focus on the Crimson Tide's defensive line targets, talk about where the Crimson Tide stand with those guys, talk a little bit about their game, of course, heading into their senior seasons with high school football so close. I am excited. I know you guys are excited to see some high school football in your local area, and we're definitely excited to provide coverage on that, as well as the season continues to creep up upon us as we enter into the second week of August. But also on this episode, I want to preview Miles McVay's commitment announcement, and we're going to turn our attention there first here on this episode here, as Miles McVay, the four-star offensive lineman out of East St. Louis High School in Illinois, is set to announce his commitment on Thursday. He will choose between Alabama, of course. He has Oregon loaded in his top school list heading into his decision. Also pick between Michigan State, got Jackson State in the mix. So the Crimson Tide are looking to pull in a commitment from a guy who they hosted over the weekend for their Champions Cookout, a guy who they have been recruiting heavily for more than a year. He also has Missouri is a school that he's looking at heading into this decision. Michigan State, Texas A&M did take an official visit to the Aggies over the summer. Plans to be in Tuscaloosa when the Crimson Tide take on the Aggies for an official visit in October. But I still feel the Tide are in a really good position with Miles McVay heading into this decision. They are the favorite. We'll see what happens on Thursday, but right now Alabama is my guess for the 6'6", more than 300-pounder out of East St. Louis High School, a guy who knows how to use his size in terms of getting down the field, blocks well in space, as you guys can see on his film, knows how to make himself wide, as you see on this play right here. Very wide body guy who knows how to make it very difficult for an edge rusher to get around him. So we'll see if the Crimson Tide can pull in this lengthy, wide offensive lineman out of East St. Louis on Thursday. Like I said at the top of the show, we're going to focus a lot on the Crimson Tide's defensive line recruiting efforts, and this show is going to be carried by that talk. I'm going to start with James Smith, a 5-star defensive lineman out of Carver Montgomery High School in Montgomery, Alabama, one of the more violent players in this 2023 recruiting class. I saw him play as a sophomore at Carver Montgomery, and he was just violent, physical, every single snap, very quick, carries his 300-pound frame really well, easily one of the best interior defensive linemen in this 2023 class. You guys see footage that I was able to get of him from spring football at Carver Montgomery, and he's even physical when they're in shorts and jerseys, so he brings that physical aspect in every part of his game. Of course, looking at him and his teammate Quay Russo, who's also a 5-star multiple recruiting sites at the moment. These are both guys who will most likely wait all the way to National Signing Day during the early signing period before they make a decision, which could go in the Tide's favor because they still have a lot of time to recruit him, get him back on campus for a game this fall. Definitely have some competition with programs like Georgia, Florida, Miami. Also have in-state program Auburn going after both of these guys. Their recruitments are pretty open. Both of them have that long top school list at the moment, so we're still going to watch their recruitment closely, of course, but it's going very, very slowly. Most likely we'll start taking official visits during the fall. We'll try to keep you guys updated on all of that. Definitely look forward to getting out to see both of those guys play this upcoming season. Another top interior defensive lineman target for the Tide is David Hicks, a 2023 5-star defensive lineman out of Texas, definitely one of the Crimson Tide's top defensive line targets, who currently has a top 7 at the moment. The Tide is included in that top 7, of course, along with Oregon, Miami, Michigan State, Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas A&M. The A&M Aggies are definitely going to be hard to beat in terms of their success with recruiting defensive linemen, especially in-state defensive linemen. But the Crimson Tide do have an opportunity to continue to recruit David Hicks, because similar to James Smith and Quay Broussard, he's a guy who is planning to take his recruitment for the long haul, possibly looking at announcing, and well, basically already looking at announcing a commitment decision during the Under Armour All-America game, which usually happens in January. So we will see what happens with his recruitment as things continue to move forward. He's one of those guys I feel Alabama will definitely benefit by getting him back on campus during the fall, hopefully a couple of times, to improve their position with them. That will really help the Tide in their push for this impressive 5-star defensive lineman, who I think will be an interior guy, has some experience rushing off the edge, show some quickness rushing off the edge, but I think his natural position will be as an interior guy, with him already being 270 pounds. Physical defensive lineman, plays well in space, can show some quickness off of the step of the football at times, flashes that quickness, longer arms. So he brings a lot to the table, has some good rush moves, as you guys saw on that last play, using his arms and using his hands to get around the defender. So we see that David Hicks has a lot to his game as well, but currently has that top 7. The Tide is included, looking at announcing commitment during the Under Armour All-America game, which is several months away. So we'll see what happens if the Tide can get Hicks back on campus during the fall for a game. And a game I would keep my eyes on would definitely be the Alabama-Texas A&M game on October 8th. Possibly get him on campus for an official visit. That is something that could definitely come to fruition, but we definitely keep our eyes on David Hicks. Quay Broussard, James Smith teammate at Carver Montgomery High School, who I said earlier is a 5-star. On multiple recruiting sites at the moment, is an interesting prospect, because he could be an edge rusher at the next level, or he could be an inside linebacker guy who will play standing up. I think the Crimson Tide like him playing there. He said that is a position that I've been talking about with him. He has a good relationship with the Crimson Tide's coaching staff, including the Crimson Tide safeties coach Charles Kelly. Freddie Roach has a good relationship with Nick Saban. Of course, Saban has been active in his recruitment since the Crimson Tide offered him, and he is a guy who has continued to rise on a lot of recruiting boards, had a very fast rise after an impressive junior season, which you guys are seeing highlights from that we are showing at the moment. You see him rushing from the edge with some good speed, a very physical guy who has some experience playing standing up and drop back and coverage, look comfortable there. A athletic prospect who Carver Montgomery actually uses as a wide receiver at times, which points to his athleticism as a whole. So he will be a priority, continue to be a priority target for Alabama moving forward. Similar to James Smith, guy who most likely wait until national signing day during the early signing period in December to announce a decision. Another top defensive lineman for the Crimson Tide is 5-star defensive lineman Damon Wilson, who will most likely be an edge rusher at the next level, a guy with day one potential. I think no matter which school he picks, he'll most likely contribute the moment he steps on campus. At 6'5" or 235 pounds, which is the weight he has listed when his huddle film first comes on. At that size, he's already college ready. When you look at Will Anderson, he's 6'4", 240 pound range. This guy, 6'5", 235, physical rusher, quick off the snap, a guy who is a relentless rusher, a guy who can show some great backside pursuit. He brings a lot to the table. Long, athletic, with that long frame. That is what Alabama is going to consistently look for in terms of getting edge rusher, a guy who has a wide array of rush moves, as well as a deep repertoire, deep bag in terms of what he can do upon the rush. So this is a high priority target for Alabama. Definitely took an official visit to the Crimson Tide in June. You see him extending his arms, playing sideline to sideline. Great play, great athleticism. There's a lot to like about Damon Wilson. I'm really high on this kid, and it's easy to see why he's definitely one of the top defensive linemen overall, one of the top overall players in this 2023 recruiting class. Guy who has kept his recruitment a little bit on the quieter side, but Ty looked to be in a really solid position with Damon Wilson, a 5-star defensive end out of Venus High School in Florida. Guy who I talked about earlier in the show who set to announce a commitment this week is KELBY Collins, a 2023 4-star defensive end in out of Gardendale High School in Gardendale, Alabama, will choose between the Crimson Tide, the Florida Gators, the Oklahoma Sooners, the South Carolina Gamecocks are also in the mix, along with the Georgia Bulldogs. Continues to look like a Florida and Alabama recruiting battle. I give the edge to the Tide at the moment, with them growing up an Alabama fan, developing a great relationship with Alabama's defensive line coach. Freddie Roach has a good relationship with Nick Saban as well. I think the Crimson Tide has prioritized him for several months now. I remember talking to him when they closed out the season, which is where I got these highlights from. When they took on Florence High School with Crimson Tide's 5-star defensive back commit Jalil Hurley. Kelby Collins told me that he felt like a priority target. I got back down to Gardendale in the spring. He said he still felt like a priority to Alabama. Of course, he has a lot of interest in the Florida Gators, with them visiting several times throughout the summer. So we'll see if he picks the Gators or the Crimson Tide on Saturday. Will definitely be in attendance for his decision upcoming from Gardendale High School in Gardendale, Alabama. Of course, Jordan RENAUD is another top Alabama target who's down to 2 schools. RENAUD recently announced his top 2 and included the Crimson Tide and the Oklahoma Sooners in that final 2. Jordan RENAUD also announced a commitment day. RENAUD will announce his commitment on September 19th. He previously said that he had visits set to both schools, which were expected to happen after his commitment decision. We'll see how he handles those visits. But the Crimson Tide look to be in a really, really good position with RENAUD after he took an official visit during the month of June. And when you go back to that visit, he said it was very eye-opening. I've talked about that quote several times when he said basically other schools have tried to recruit against Alabama. They're basically recruiting for Alabama, just talking about how the Crimson Tide have done a really good job of selling their program to him. He said he feels he has a great relationship with Nick Saban after that visit. Said they talked multiple times and he just has a different level of respect. When you take a look at RENAUD out of Tyler Legacy High School in Texas, he's a physically strong defensive lineman who will most likely be an edge rusher at the next level. When you watch his film, you see him pushing offensive linemen back, getting to the football. You see he has an ability to stack and shed as well. I think on this play right here, before I even go even deeper, you're going to see him push the offensive lineman into the backfield and see him stack and shed and get to the running back. So he's one of those strong edge rushers, a guy who has some rush moves to his game. See him using his hands to get past the offensive lineman. The Crimson Tide really like this guy. Of course, the Sooners are still in the mix as well. We will see if the Tide or the Sooners can pull in RENAUD on September 19th with this decision locked in. RUEBEN BAIN is another Alabama target, a guy who will most likely be down to 2 schools in the future, in my opinion. Just taking a look at his recruitment and talk about the schools he has the most respect for. Of course, he's from Miami, goes to Miami Central High School, has some connections to the Hurricane program. So the Hurricanes still look like the favorite, but the Tide have done a really, really good job recruiting BAIN. He took an official visit during the month of June. He said during that official visit, he got an opportunity to spend time with Alabama's coaches as well. Had a previous relationship with the Crimson Tide's defensive back coach Travaris Robinson, of course. But I'm going to read a quote from BAIN. He said there was a lot of love, support, information, and more love during the visit. His biggest takeaway was the extra length. Alabama goes to make sure that their players are the best that they possibly can be. He said they are elite. They do everything at an elite level and have no plans of slowing down. So he has a lot of interest in the Crimson Tide. He said his relationship with Alabama is great. Everybody on their staff shows love. He said they're definitely one of the schools at the top. And if you just take a look at his recruitment, the Tide would definitely have to defeat the Miami Hurricanes to pull this aggressive 6'2" edge rusher out of the state of Florida, a guy who has the potential to be a versatile defensive lineman. Could be an edge rusher, which is where he succeeds at Miami Central High School, obviously. At 6'2", does not possess the length that Alabama usually goes after, but they have brought in guys around that size in terms of edge rushers. Taking a look at Jeremiah Alexander in the 2022 recruiting class, but taking a look at BAIN here in the 2023 recruiting cycle, has a similar game to Alexander in terms of being physical, having power, because you have to have power and have to have some advanced rush moves to make some noise off the edge if you do not have that strength at this particular point in your development. But the Tide look to be in a solid position for BAIN. Would definitely have to defeat the Hurricanes. Getting him on campus will be very valuable if they can get him on campus during the season at some point. That would go a long way for the Crimson Tide. EDRIC Hill is another interior guy the Crimson Tide are going after out of Missouri. The Tide, the Sooners, and the Missouri Tigers look to be the teams who who are going to most likely battle it out for Hill, guy who's approaching 300 pounds, a physical interior defensive lineman, a guy with some good strength, a guy with some quickness, does not explode off of the snap, but he's a guy who plays well in space. You guys can see on his film right now. In terms of his versatility, I think he will if he was to commit to Alabama, come in as an interior guy and will continue to be an interior guy. I know a lot of times we see guys who are a little bit more versatile, guy who could possibly be a hybrid in terms of man defensive lineman, could come from the edge, could come from the interior, but I think Hill makes a lot of noise as an interior edge rusher, can be a destructive force in terms of wreaking havoc inside of the interior of the defensive line. So those are the guys I want to talk about on today's show. Talk about some of those big and physical defensive linemen who the Crimson Tide are going after. Of course, they have some flip targets in terms of guys who they are going after along the defensive front as well. I mean, take a look at Keon Keeley. Pretty sure they're going to still go after Peter Woods, 5-star defensive end out of Thompson High School in Alabama, was verbally committed to the Clemson Tigers. So the Tide still have a long way to go in terms of recruiting defensive linemen as a whole. I know the Tide's 2023 commits are pushing to help Alabama land possibly the best class ever in terms of on paper and recruiting rankings and ratings, and for that to be possible, they will have to help the Crimson Tide sign some great defensive linemen, great guys across the defensive front, some dogs in the trenches, because the game is still won in the trenches. You still can make some noise there. Georgia Bulldogs showed you that last season when they won the national championship, defeating Alabama, of course. So if you have a good group of interior defensive linemen, great edge rushers, you definitely can make things very hard on an offense. So the Crimson Tide is still going after these guys, trying to close out that 2023 recruiting class with a bang. But that is what I wanted to talk about on today's show. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Subscribers, hit that notification bell, be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel. Then head over to touchdownalabama.com. Pick up your subscription today. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber only articles. Get your hands on yearly print magazine issue as well. We are gearing up to release another issue, so no better time to pick up that subscription today to touchdownalabama.com. Then head to the Google Play Store, download the app from the Android, the Google Play Store, and also if you have an Apple device, download the app in the Apple App Store. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama.
Process.